My wife's affair with her boss, who's secretly been siphoning off $250, $0 from our joint account for years, just came to light. Now she's suing me for half the debt, claiming I hid the truth. But the real shocker is the notarized will she forged to cut me out of our inheritance. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this. Honestly, I always believed that my marriage to Lisa was solid. We had our ups and downs, sure, but I thought we were in it together, building a life, planning for the future. But then out of nowhere, everything started to unravel in a way I couldn't have predicted. It all came crashing down in a matter of days, and the most shocking part, it wasn't just the affair or the money issues, it was the betrayal of trust on a whole new level. It started with small things. Lisa, my wife, became distant. She'd cancel plans last minute, brush off my questions, and seemed more interested in her phone than in us. I noticed she was hiding her phone more often, and when I tried to look at it, she'd get defensive, snap at me that I was controlling or paranoid. She'd blow off my concerns, accuse me of overreacting, but I knew something was off. Women don't change that much without a reason. Then came the text messages. I saw a few of them pop up on her phone, nothing explicit at first, just flirty comments. I brushed it off, telling myself maybe I was overthinking. But then I found out she'd been meeting her boss, David, secretly. I caught her in a lie one night when she said she was working late, but I followed her and saw her getting into David's car. That was the moment I knew. My wife was having an affair, and she didn't even bother to hide it anymore. The real shock was the money. Turns out, Lisa had been siphoning off $250, $0 from our joint account over the past few years. I had no idea. I always trusted her with our finances, and I never suspected a thing. She'd been funneling the money into some secret account, probably to support her affair or maybe just to cover her own ass. I found bank statements hidden in her emails. She'd been transferring small amounts here and there, but over time it added up to a fortune. I was furious, betrayed, and feeling completely helpless. When I confronted her about the affair, her reaction was classic Lisa, bitchy, dismissive, and full of lies. She told me I was imagining things, that I was insecure, that I was just jealous because I didn't satisfy her anymore. She insisted she was just talking to David, that it was nothing serious. But I could see the guilt in her eyes, and I knew better. She was lying, and I had proof. The money was the real dagger. How could she do this to me, to us? She was willing to destroy everything for some cheap sex and a lie. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I kept thinking about all the plans we had, all the trust I'd misplaced, and how she'd betrayed me so easily. I was angry, so angry I wanted to scream, and devastated, like I'd been punched in the gut. The worst part, she kept lying, kept spinning stories that didn't add up. I started to wonder if I even knew who she was anymore. How many other secrets was she hiding? What else was she willing to do? It was as if my entire world was shifting beneath my feet. I knew I had to do something, but I had no idea what. The next few days were a blur of chaos. I couldn't focus on anything else. Every time I thought about Lisa and her lies, I felt this burning rage mixed with a deep, sinking betrayal. I started digging into the bank statements more thoroughly, trying to piece together exactly how much she'd taken and where it might all be going. The numbers kept piling up, and I realized she'd been planning this for years. Every secret transfer, every hidden account, every lie carefully woven into the fabric of our life together. I also started noticing things I'd missed before. Her phone was more guarded than ever, and she'd be quick to dismiss my questions with a sharp tone or a fake smile. When I pressed her about the money, she'd brush it off, calling me paranoid or accusing me of accusing her of something she didn't do. But I knew better. I had the proof, and I wasn't going to let her gaslight me into silence. One night I decided I'd had enough. I needed answers face to face. I set up a time to confront her, hoping she'd come clean. But Lisa, being Lisa, had her own game plan. She was bitchy from the moment I walked into the room, her arms crossed, her eyes narrowing. "What's your problem now?" she snapped, trying to act innocent. I laid out the bank statements, the transfers, the texts I'd uncovered. Her face shifted from defiance to panic in seconds. Her excuses started pouring out. She was stressed, overworked, just trying to keep us afloat. She claimed she'd only done it because she thought I'd judge her or stop her from having a life. She insisted she hadn't slept with David, that it was all just flirty banter, but her tone was defensive, almost guilty. I didn't buy it. I could see through her lies like glass. She's always been good at spinning stories, but this time I'd had enough. Her reaction to the whole thing was infuriating. She kept trying to turn it around, accusing me of not trusting her, saying I was crazy for suspecting her. She even had the nerve to say I was overreacting because I was possessive. I was so furious I could barely speak. How could she sit there and deny everything after I'd shown her the evidence? It was like talking to a wall, and the wall was her lies. I felt a strange mixture of sadness and anger. I was devastated that the woman I'd trusted with my life could do this, that she'd betray me so easily. But at the same time, I was furious, so furious I wanted to shake her. I wanted her to understand what she'd done, what she'd lost. The betrayal cut deep, but what hurt even more was realizing that she'd been lying to my face for years, hiding her affair, siphoning off our savings, and manipulating me like I was some kind of fool. That night I sat alone in our living room, staring at the bank statement spread out in front of me. I couldn't believe she'd done all this, and I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. The worst part, I knew this wasn't just about the money or the sex, it was about trust, or what was left of it. I was angry at myself for not seeing the signs sooner, for not protecting myself from her deception. I kept asking myself how I could have been so stupid, so naive. But deep down, I knew I wasn't stupid, I just loved her too much to see the truth. Now I was faced with a choice: confront her further, fight to save what's left of our marriage, or walk away and start over. The thought of her with David, the thought of the money gone, the lies, the forged will, everything, it all felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. And yet, I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let her get away with this. Not without consequences. Not without some kind of reckoning. After that confrontation, I knew I couldn't just sit around and hope things would get better. Lisa was still acting like she hadn't done anything wrong, but I had enough proof to make her squirm. I decided to dig even deeper. If she was willing to lie about everything, I had to get to the bottom of her motives, her secrets, and most importantly, how far she was willing to go. One thing I discovered was the forged will she had notarized just a few months back. I found copies of it in her email drafts, completely fake, with her name, the date, and a signature that looked suspiciously like her handwriting. She forged a notarized document to cut me out of our inheritance, claiming I was unfit or some nonsense. It was a cold, calculated move, and it made my blood run cold. She planned this all along, and I was just now catching up. I couldn't believe she'd be so ruthless, using the law, faking documents, lying straight to my face. It was like she was trying to erase me from our life together, from our future. I had to act fast. I hired a lawyer to look into the forged will, and I started gathering evidence to contest it. I knew that if she could forge something so important, I couldn't trust her with anything. My mind raced, trying to figure out what her endgame was. Was she planning to leave me completely? Was she planning to run away with David and the money? Or was this just the beginning of a bigger plan to screw me over? Meanwhile, Lisa kept up her act of innocence. She'd throw tantrums, call me paranoid, accuse me of trying to control her, and insist she was the victim. She'd say I was crazy for suspecting her, that I was just jealous because she was more successful than me. She'd lie about her meetings with David, claiming they were client calls or business dinners, but I saw through her. I had her texts, her bank transfers, her forged documents. She was caught in her own web of lies, and she didn't even realize it. One night, I decided I needed to confront her again, but this time with my lawyer present. I wanted her to see I was serious, that I wasn't going to let her manipulate her way out of this. When I showed her the evidence of the forged will and her secret bank transfers, her face turned white. She tried to deny everything at first, then she broke down, started crying, yelling, claiming she didn't mean for things to get this bad. But her tears couldn't undo what she'd done. I felt a sick mixture of disgust and disappointment. At that moment, I realized I couldn't trust her anymore, not as my wife, not as a person. The woman I thought I knew was gone. She was a liar, a manipulator, someone who would do anything to get her way, even if it meant destroying everything we had. I was furious, not just because she cheated, but because she was willing to go this far to cover her tracks, to lie and forge documents and siphon off our savings. I felt betrayed on a level I never imagined possible. I started planning my next move. I knew I couldn't stay with her, not after all this. The money was gone, the trust was shattered, and I had no idea what her next step was. I felt like I was living in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Every time I looked at her, I saw a stranger, someone capable of anything, including theft, lies, and betrayal. I wondered how many other lies she'd told, how many other secrets she was hiding. I was angry, yes, but also heartbroken. How did I miss all the signs? How did I let this happen? The more I uncovered, the clearer it became that I needed to protect myself. I couldn't let her walk away with everything. Our money, our future, our life. I decided I'd fight her in court if I had to, contest the forged will and make sure she paid for what she'd done. I also knew I had to get out of this marriage for my own sanity. The woman I loved was gone, replaced by someone cold and willing to lie, cheat, and steal her way to what she wanted. I sat there that night, staring at the evidence spread out before me, feeling a mix of disgust and resolve. I'd been blindsided, yes, but I wasn't going down without a fight. I was going to expose her, take back what was mine, and start rebuilding from the wreckage. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but I knew I had to do it. For myself, for the truth, and for whatever shred of dignity I had left. Over the next few weeks, everything moved so quickly I barely had time to breathe. I hired a private investigator to dig into Lisa's activities, her meetings, her secret accounts, her communication with David. Turns out, the investigator uncovered even more than I expected. Lisa had been meeting David in hotels, sometimes multiple times a week, always with some excuse, a business trip, a conference, or working late. But the truth was clear, they'd been having sex, and a lot of it. I found explicit texts and photos, and even evidence that they'd been planning to run away together once she had enough money. Meanwhile, I pushed forward with the legal process. My lawyer filed a claim to contest the forged will, and I started gathering evidence to prove she'd been siphoning off our savings. I wanted her held accountable, not just for the affair, but for the financial betrayal as well. I also learned that Lisa had been making secret withdrawals from our joint account, sometimes in small amounts to avoid suspicion, sometimes in larger chunks when she thought I wasn't paying attention. The amount was staggering, more than I ever imagined. What made it worse was her attitude. She refused to admit anything, even when confronted with irrefutable evidence. She'd scream, call me controlling, accuse me of stalking her, and say I was just jealous or insecure. She'd lie about the affair, deny everything, and then turn around and accuse me of cheating or hiding things myself. It was like talking to a wall. She'd twist everything to make herself the victim. One day, I caught her in a blatant lie. She told me she was at her sister's house, but I found her car parked outside David's apartment. I saw her leaving in the middle of the night, her makeup smudged, her hair a mess. I was furious. I called her out right then and there. She denied it at first, but I showed her the photos I'd taken, her sneaking out, her kissing David in the dark. Her face turned beet red, and she finally broke down. She told me she was just lonely, that David made her feel alive again, that I was boring and absent. That was the moment I realized how deep her lies went. She wasn't just cheating. She was trying to erase me from her life entirely. I had a long, hard conversation with my lawyer about the best way to proceed. I knew I couldn't keep living like this, not with her sneaking around, forging documents, and stealing from us. I decided to file for divorce, but I also wanted full custody of the property and the money she'd stolen. I was prepared to fight her in court, to expose everything, her lies, her affair, her financial crimes. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I had to do it. The day I served her the divorce papers was the day she finally snapped. She screamed, called me every name in the book, accused me of ruining her life. She said I was possessive, abusive, and that I'd driven her to cheat because I was boring. Honestly, I didn't care. I'd reached a point where I just wanted her out of my life. I wanted the truth to come out, and I wanted her to pay for what she'd done. As I watched her lose her mind that day, I felt a strange sense of relief mixed with heartbreak. I knew I was doing the right thing, even if it hurt like hell. I never imagined I'd be in this position, fighting to get my life back from someone I once loved. But I also knew I couldn't let her get away with everything. Not the affair, not the money, not the lies. I was determined to see this through, no matter how ugly it got. In the aftermath, I moved out of the house, took control of our finances, and started rebuilding my life. I cut all ties with Lisa except what was legally necessary. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, letting go of the woman I thought I knew, facing the harsh reality of her betrayal. But I also learned a lot about trust, deception, and what it means to stand up for yourself. I realized that sometimes the only way to truly reclaim your life is to face the truth head-on, no matter how painful it is. The court proceedings dragged on longer than I expected, but I was prepared for the fight. Lisa was stubborn as hell, insisting she was the victim, claiming I was trying to ruin her, all while denying the affair and the forgery. Her attorney played the victim card, trying to paint her as some wronged wife, but I had enough evidence to shut that down. The private investigators' reports, the bank statements, the forged will, everything was on my side. Still, Lisa's bitchy attitude and her constant lies made the process exhausting. One of the nastiest moments came when she accused me of hiding assets, claiming I was the one siphoning money. I had to sit through her accusations, trying to keep my temper in check. I knew she was trying to muddy the waters, but I had the facts, and I made sure to present every single one. I also brought in experts to verify the forged will, and they confirmed it was a fake. That was the nail in her coffin. The judge wasn't convinced by her sob stories. After hearing all the evidence, he ruled that the forged will was invalid, that Lisa had indeed been siphoning our savings, and that I was entitled to a larger share of the inheritance. The judge ordered her to pay back the stolen money and gave me full custody of the property. I felt a rush of relief when the verdict finally came down. It was like a huge weight had been lifted from my shoulders. But even with that victory, I knew the real damage was done. Lisa's reputation was shattered and our marriage was beyond saving. She threw one last tantrum in court, screaming, crying, accusing me of everything under the sun, trying to turn the tables. But it was too late. The evidence was too overwhelming. The judge had seen through her lies, and I finally felt some sense of justice. After the court hearing, I moved out of the house for good. I sold the place, took control of our joint accounts, and started to rebuild my life from scratch. I cut all contact with Lisa, no calls, no texts, no emails. I couldn't stand to look at her, let alone trust her again. The betrayal was just too deep. I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. I was finally free, but the scars of everything she'd done lingered. Looking back, I realize I learned a lot about trust, deception, and how fragile even the strongest relationships can be. I also learned that sometimes the truth has to come out in the ugliest ways, and that justice isn't always pretty. I'm still healing, still trying to figure out what's next, but I know I'll never let someone do this to me again. I'll be more cautious, more guarded. And I'll never forget the lesson that betrayal can come from the people you trust the most. Most importantly, I want anyone reading this to know, don't ignore the signs. If something feels off, it probably is. Trust your instincts, gather evidence if you need to, and don't be afraid to fight for your sanity and your future. Because, at the end of the day, no amount of love is worth sacrificing your dignity or your money to a liar. That's what I've learned from all this chaos. And honestly, I'm glad I did. Now that everything is settled, I spend a lot of time reflecting on how quickly life can change. One day, you think you're building a future with someone you trust, and the next, it's falling apart in ways you never imagined. Lisa's betrayal, the lies, the forged will, the siphoned money, it all felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. But I'm also grateful for the clarity that came from it all. It forced me to face truths I'd been blind to for too long. I've learned that trust is fragile, and once broken, it's almost impossible to repair. But I also learned that strength comes from facing reality head-on, no matter how painful. You have to protect yourself, your sanity, and your future. I realized that love can sometimes blind you, and that the most important thing is your own well-being. It's easy to get caught up in the fantasy of a happy marriage, but if the foundation isn't real, if it's built on lies, then it's doomed from the start. Getting out of that marriage was the hardest decision I ever made, but it was also the best. I don't regret fighting for what's right, even if it meant going through hell. I had to see her for who she truly was, to face the ugly truth, and then I had to cut her out of my life completely. Now I focus on rebuilding what I lost, my sense of peace, my trust in myself and my future. I'm slowly learning to trust again, but this time more cautiously. To anyone going through something similar, I'd say this: don't ignore the signs. Don't let anyone manipulate or lie to you just because you love them. If you suspect something's wrong, dig deep. Gather evidence, seek help, and stand your ground. Trust your instincts. Your gut is rarely wrong. And most importantly, don't be afraid to walk away. Sometimes the only way to truly be free is to leave behind what's toxic, even if it hurts. I've come to accept that not all stories have a happy ending, but mine is about reclaiming my life. About learning that I am stronger than I thought, and that justice, even if delayed, can be achieved. I lost a lot in this process: money, trust, years of my life, but I gained clarity, resilience, and a renewed sense of self. And that, in the end, is worth more than any inheritance or false love. So here I am, ready to move forward. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know I won't let anyone else betray me like that again. I'll build my life on honesty, integrity, and trust, things that can't be stolen or forged. And I'll remind myself every day: never ignore the warning signs, because once trust is broken, it's nearly impossible to fix. But you can survive, and sometimes you even come out stronger.